All right, hello, welcome back everyone to another episode of Trail Signs. And today I'm joined with another YouTuber. Last week we had the special episode with. Well, I found out later she was a YouTuber, so I guess it does still count. But anyways, this time I'm going to be joined by my friend Mike from About the Journey. How you doing today, Mike?
I'm doing great. How about yourself?
Oh, can't complain. It's another beautiful day in Montana, like most of them are. So, been enjoying my staycation and taking it easy a little bit. So, interestingly enough, I have to say that I had Mike follow my channel, and he commented on a lot of the videos that I was doing, and we always had a really good conversation back and forth. And embarrassingly enough, I think you had been conversing with me for a while, and my buddy Tiff from Love Dogs, we were talking about something that you would comment on, and she goes, "Oh yeah, his channel is great," and I was like, "Channel? What?" And I had no idea that you also had a YouTube channel, so I immediately subscribed to it. And I have to say, from the first video I watched, I was just amazingly impressed at how well done your videos are. Like, I think I'm pretty good at editing, but after I watched your videos, I was like, I got nothing on this guy, because your videos
Uh,
are amazing. So I just wanted to
well,
start off by saying that.
well, thank you very much. Yeah, a lot of it's just wrangling with the software, but yeah, thanks. I'm glad you guys like them.
Well, that's the thing. Like, I think you learn a more of an appreciation for it once you've gone through it and know what goes into making them. And
Yeah.
so for me, anytime I get a compliment from another YouTuber, it means so much more. But yeah, like I said, your videos are absolutely stunning and very well edited. And I'm just kind of curious as to kind of what's your background? How did you decide to get started in the channel? And what's been your favorite thing about it so far?
Yeah. So I had let's see, I was had already been filming some things when I've been out hiking in the mountains. So I used to live in Alaska. Did 28 years up there, and did a lot of hiking and a lot of wandering around. I mean, Alaska's a huge place with just all the wilderness you could possibly ask for. And so I've got some older family members that they were always curious. What does it look like up there? You go, I see all these pictures when you're out hiking, and so I decided to start doing it to create a little bit more of an experience for them and put them up on YouTube so they could actually see a live video of what's going on. And so that's kind of why I started. While I was doing my research, I came across a few other YouTubers. There were like three in particular that really inspired me. And I was like, you know what? I want in. This looks like a lot of fun. It's great to, I really enjoy seeing other areas of the country. I really enjoy seeing a lot of these, different state parks. There's one guy that I came across, I think it was like the second one, who he goes around to a ton of state parks, particularly in along the Pacific Northwest and California. And he's based in Las Vegas, but it just gave me a lot of inspiration and motivation to go to a lot of these different places that I wouldn't have heard of otherwise. And then there was another guy. Can I name drop?
Sure, go ahead.
Oh, okay. So there's another guy. We've become friends since, but this guy named Eric Poulin, and his channel is called Seeking Lost. And I would highly recommend checking it out if anybody would like to see some deep dives into somebody that's gone through and created his own hiking routes, kind of like along the line of the Pacific Crest or the Continental Divide. And, he put a lot of work into it. The first one I came across, he was out in Nevada for 1,100 miles out there over, I think, 4 or 5 months. And it was just him. He had to figure out where he had to put cache water or where there were water sources. And anyway, the whole thing just really inspired me. So I started doing the same thing with hiking up there in Alaska. And so that's basically where it started.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, that's really similar to how I started out.
Now we're back.
Okay. Oh, your audio is still coming through. No worries. Yeah. So we're messing with some.
Okay, that's good.
Some rough internet here, so bear with us. But yeah, I kind of did the same thing. Like, I had several people that were definitely saying how much they were interested in seeing about my experiences and stuff, and I'd also been following some other YouTubers that kind of inspired me, and so I made the leap into it, and and I've loved it so far. Like I said, the for me the most amazing part is just the community that I've met around, and all of that stuff with that. So that's awesome. So what's a little bit more of your background? Because I know you do kind of more the overlanding type thing. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think I'd mentioned in one of our conversations, I had a pretty bad dog habit in my years past. I could never say no to dogs needing adoption. So when I
That's
was living
awesome.
up in Alaska, I had yeah, it was great, loved it. Yeah, it's just fantastic to have a big pack of them, and I had up to 7 at one point. And so when I started doing a lot of, yeah, it was a lot of fun. But I still have my house in Alaska, and it's on 5 acres, and it's right next to the this is on the Kenai Peninsula, and it's right next to the Kenai National
Beautiful.
Wildlife Refuge. So I could just go right out my backyard onto a trail that goes into, there's a big chunk of burro land that they one of the equestrian groups on the peninsula has put in a really nice trail system there for people riding horses or mountain biking or just hiking, walking dogs like I did. Um, and so I've got all this public land right out my doorstep, and but why I decided to get into overlanding, because honestly I really like backpacking. That's that kind of travel where you put everything you need on your back and you just go wandering out in the woods for days, weeks, however long. It's kind of always been my favorite. But just being able to travel practically with the dogs, backpacking wasn't, it's kind of tough. So I kind of decided, well, I'll just go car camping. These days it's called overlanding, but it's basically just car camping, but you're using a 4-wheel drive pickup truck so you can get up on the rough trails that most people aren't going to go up. And then I just started, just taking day hikes and doing that kind of stuff. So it was really more out of a convenience kind of a thing, and still being able to travel with all of the dogs. But yeah, so that's kind of what got me into it. I do have a bit of a background in the outdoor industry, so, kind of like yourself. I did several years at the. Can I name the corporation?
Sure.
Okay, so
we're all on
yeah,
people playground here.
all right. Yeah. So I did a bunch of years in the '90s working for REI here in Salt Lake City, and of course it's a great place to meet other people that are really into doing outdoor stuff. At the time, I was just into hiking and backpacking, but of course, you get exposed to all sorts of people that are into rock climbing, river rafting, kayaking, mountain biking. I mean, it just the whole world just kind of opened up for me then, and so it's just kind of been this pursuit that I've had ever since. I just try to get out and hike as much as possible, get out and camp and backpack. I'm ashamed to say I haven't actually been on a backpacking trip. That is one with where I've got a tent and everything. I have one video where I hike up to a historic cabin in the Kenai National Wildlife Refuge. Yeah,
Yeah, I
but that's
watched that one.
it. Ah, oh, thank you.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
absolutely. Well, and I think that's the coolest thing about outdoors in general is, that there's so many different ways to enjoy it, but even though they're very different in their own rights, they're all kind of generally connected, I think, at one point. And typically you run into a lot of these people that are doing them, and it's very common that they're doing lots of different activities. So I think it's always
Yeah.
kind of cool. And I think another thing I really like about YouTube is I have the opportunity to kind of experience those things from people who are more versed in it than I am. And so even though I work at a pretty specialized store, I mean, we generally speaking do backpacking and cross country skiing. And we
Oh.
still have a lot of people coming in and out that are doing other things, and it's there's just always a lot of crossover. So,
Hmm.
and I'd be lying if I said I didn't enjoy a good car camping trip myself, because they can be a blast.
Yeah, yeah. You can bring a 12-pack of beer and not have to worry about having to hoof it up the mountain.
Heck yeah, yeah. Those creature comforts, it's definitely worth it.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I would probably get more into overlanding, but I can barely afford the backpacking port of it. So I think could get a little bit rough. But you know,
Yeah.
one thing I will say though is if you ever find yourself over in Montana, you know, we'll hook you up and we'll get out there and do some backpacking.
Absolutely, I would love to. I was actually through Missoula this summer. My wife and I drove up to Alaska, and you know, you had said you worked in the outdoor industry, so we wandered into REI. I was thinking, well, maybe he works at the REI here. We just have this, just run into him or something like that. But yeah,
Yeah.
turns out you didn't.
No, yeah, I'm in Billings,
Yeah.
and I work
Oh, I
for.
thought you were in Missoula.
No, I'm in
Oh, okay.
Billings. Sorry. Well,
Ah, okay.
that would
Sorry
have
about
been.
that.
No, that's
Ah,
okay. Yeah, I work for a local store here in Billings.
nice.
So we do have an REI, but yeah, I don't. Nothing against them at all. I just don't. You know, they're not who I work for. So,
Yeah,
but definitely been in there a few times, and you know, they got a good thing going. So, we're all. It's all part of the same industry. So generally
yes.
speaking,
Yeah.
we're more like Mike, just like with the YouTube community, we're more friends than we are enemies. So.
Yeah, yeah. Have a lot in
So,
common.
yeah, we get
Absolutely.
calls from those guys all the time. So awesome.
Ah, nice.
I just lost my place here. So, the other
Ah,
thing I wanted to touch on, and something I know that you're very passionate about, and I equally am too, but I'm curious as what your take on it is you know, you describe yourself as a public lands enthusiast. And
yes.
along those lines, why do you think public lands are so important to not only you and I, but the public in general?
Well, I'll start with you know, those of us in the outdoor YouTube community. Just about everything that we all do is on public lands. Whether you're out here in the West, where you have just, you know, miles and miles of emptiness with nobody in it, or even if you're in a place like Texas, like Tangent Trails, Jerry, we both know him. I really liked coming across his channel because I had no idea that Texas had what it is. Typically, Texas doesn't have much public land outside of a little bit of BLM land and the park, but evidently there are a whole little network of what are they? National grasslands, I think, managed by the
Yeah,
Forest Service.
yeah,
Yeah,
I think so. Yeah.
yeah, I was really surprised to see that, and then watching Jerry and his friend Eli, what is it, Adventures of Eli?
Mhm.
You know, watching some of those guys' adventures was, yeah, it was pretty interesting. All of a sudden, I started thinking, huh, maybe I should visit Texas one of these years. But yeah, so it's so you know, the public lands are really important for certainly for us that have worked in the outdoor industry. Again, that's something that almost exclusively happens on public lands. When I lived in Alaska, I did a little bit of hunting and I did a lot of fishing. And again, you know, these resources are out there and available for us to go out and enjoy, or if we're hunting or fishing, even foraging for mushrooms, picking berries. You know, there's a lot of those kind of activities. All that stuff happens in areas where you have large tracts of undamaged habitat. And with the public land, you know, and all that stuff is federal public land these days. You have state also interspersed within it, but it is because most of the lands in the West weren't necessarily claimed at the time. You know, most of the areas that were better for crops, better for farming, better for building cities, you know, those all were conveyed, or there was land that was conveyed to the states as part of their enabling document, or their enabling acts that they could go in and develop and use for expanding and growing, you know, their cities. But all the rest of it just became a catch-all. It was either in the U.S. Forest Service or the Bureau of Land Management. You know, there's a fair amount of fish and wildlife, and then of course the national parks. And why I think those things are really important is one of the best things about living out here in the West is access to that. It is literally right out our back door. You know, I live on the outskirts of Salt Lake these days, but I grew up in the city, and you know, where I grew up from my mom's house, it was a 10-minute drive up to Mill Creek Canyon, which, you know, is just a beautiful place. It accesses several wilderness areas. It's got a gorgeous stream. It's lush. It's green. It's full of all sorts of trails, and so having those kind of resources, you know, right in our back door is you know, it's a really good thing. It's like one of the best things about living out here in the West. From a ecological standpoint, having these large tracts of habitat that have been undisturbed are very good if you're a hunter or an angler. You really would not have that, like I'll use Texas as an example again. If you are wanting to go hunting in Texas, chances are you're going to have to go and pay for hunting guides, or maybe not a guide, but you're going to have to pay to go and hunt on somebody's private land. There's very little land there that you can just go and wander into, and with a $50 hunting license. And then, of course, there's just all of the environmental issues with habitat fragmentation and just, humanity's crush of consumerism on the environment. We all use gadgets, we all use resources, but we need to be smart and we need to manage these things in a way. I'm kind of an optimist. I think we can have our cake and eat it too. We just need to be smart about the way we approach these things. But far too often, you have extractive industries in there. You have attitudes that have been around for a long time about, the natural world's place in the modern world. And so, there's a lot of friction. I usually try to remind people that we have made a lot of progress. Humanity in general, in a lot of areas, life is definitely better for the vast majority of people in this country and on the planet. It's not perfect, but we're making we're making progress in a lot of those areas. And a lot of that comes with, humans learning to live within, the balance of their environment. And so, with having some of these public lands out west that weren't necessarily privately owned, weren't part of the cities or the states or any, local municipalities, we have these just massive areas of still wild land that is, I can go into places out here in the West Desert where it is still the exact same as it was when this country was founded, and that is an incredibly cool thing. You get to go out and experience this natural history that, this world that's been going on for thousands of years, long before humanity was, around on this continent, even before the Indians. It's been going on for a long time. And so yeah, I think it's just an absolutely fantastic opportunity that we have in this country. And I got to point out, Canada also has a massive amount of public lands too. I mean, Canada is, anybody out there listening, if you ever have the time, do the drive through Canada up to Alaska. You will not be disappointed. It is just an absolutely mind-blowing experience, So, but, they have up there, they call them crown lands because they're still, I guess, technically owned by the Queen of England. But, no, the King of England.
Yep.
yeah, get that straight. But, just having all of these resources, the ecology, the having these untouched areas where at this point in humanity's development, we can actually go out and study these areas, study the animals, study the ecosystems while they're still relatively intact. So hopefully that wasn't too long of an answer, but it's that kind of stuff that really motivates me. What kind of turned me into being a bit more of an activist about it, though, was growing up here in Utah and having Utah's political class taking the attitudes that they have towards public lands these days. And it just doesn't sit well with me. So.
No, that was a perfect answer. I agree with 100% with everything you said. Obviously I work in the outdoor industry now, and I'll kind of touch on that here in a minute because it definitely plays a part in the industry. And the industry has for too long kind of ignored that part of it, and finally starting to see some headway in there. But before I worked in the industry, I went to school for outdoor leadership, but I also took and did degrees in interpretation, outdoor interpretation, as well as wildlife management. And so a lot of my classes were based on ecological stuff and things like that. So obviously, I'm also a huge supporter of public lands and for keeping them public. And for me, it's been interesting having moved out here and realizing that public lands are things that are, regardless of political spectrum, passionate for different people in different ways. Montana is a hugely pro public lands place. And there's so much conservation and hunting and stuff like that. Obviously a lot of that goes on in this state, and we wouldn't have that in industry at all if it wasn't for the public lands that we have. We do have quite a bit of public or private land as well, but interestingly enough, here most of our private land is open to hunting through different agreements that they have with the landowners and stuff, which unfortunately has been changing here lately. And it's a pretty contentious part of Montana, stuff going on. But definitely, I think the public lands is something that all too often in the current, in consumer-based type of society that we have, that gets overlooked and is easily displaced for the the belief that we have to constantly continue to develop, which is not true at all. And actually, I think, as you pointed out, for various different reasons, it's very important that we don't develop those areas. And the industry itself, the outdoor industry, it's a little bit of a double-edged sword, because let's face it, it's a capitalist type of income. And it's one of the largest. The outdoor industry, I think, I'm sure somebody will correct me on the number here, but I want to say it's like 17 billion with a B dollars annually are spent in some sort of outdoor pursuit. And the companies that make money off of that, gear companies and things like that, have not historically done a very good job of giving back to the very thing that is the heart of their industry, which is the public lands. Because if we didn't have the place to go do the recreation, we wouldn't have the need for the recreation. Fortunately, I think there are a lot of things that are changing in that. There's the 1% for the planet. I know Darwin had his Give a Shit campaign. And so there is more and more, I think, of the industry is kind of getting on board with that. Definitely more in the cottage brands, which I think is really important for them. It's been slower for the larger brands because, they like to make their money. But like I said, hopefully people will continue to realize just the importance of these things, and not only the importance of the resource and having access to that and the ecological impact, but even just the cultural aspect of it and the historical aspect of it. I know that that's something that you focus on quite a bit with the lands that you visit, which I think is awesome. And I have a question about that here in a minute. But like Bears Ears and all of those guys are a perfect example. These are important places, and and I think that's where a lot of the YouTube company or YouTube channels have a really big advantage, and yours included in this, is that it's a way for us to get people to care about these public lands. Because if people don't care about it, they're not going to want to protect it. And so I think there's a bit of a double-edged sword with sharing some of these places, but at the same time, people have to know that they're important. And like I say, I think that your approach to the way that you talk about the public lands and you share those histories and you share those things, it really makes you fired up to see those places and to protect them. And so it's very evident that is highly one of your passions, and I applaud you for that.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, that's kind of as I got into doing this YouTube thing more, I kind of realized that if I lean more into not just having the pretty pictures and the nice footage, if I lean more into trying to educate people a little bit, about the history and the ecology in these areas, it hopefully will motivate them to even if they don't go out and see these things, it hopefully will motivate them to at least be more aware of these issues and these lands that are out there. We get the little breakdowns of demographics that are watching our channels, and mine are a full half of it are guys that are 64 and older. And a lot of those guys, I hear from them in the comments, they can't necessarily get out and do this stuff anymore, or they did it when they were young and they, all of a sudden found YouTubers on on YouTube going out to all these areas. And so, I think that there's a lot of people that are getting to kind of revisit what they like, getting to kind of think about these things differently, maybe learn something they didn't quite know about an area that they might have gone to a lot. And I think a lot of those things are helpful for trying to certainly keep public lands in public hands. Public lands are like one of the last bipartisan issues. It's one of those things where, us as, we're backpackers, hikers, ATVers, hunters, anglers, it just goes on and on. Anybody that uses these public lands, we all have a dog in this fight, and it's really important I think, that we all stick together. Despite that, some people might not, they might not like the ATVers because they're noisy or whatever, or, there's certain people in the hiking, world that don't like hunters, and the one thing that I think is that I always try to remind people of, and you kind of touched on having the players in the outdoor industry contribute more to the upkeep and helping to fund public land, help to fund the public land industries, or I'm sorry, the agencies. Like one of the things that I think a lot of people don't realize is that there already is a lot of funding and a funding mechanism. What is it? The Robertson-Pittman Act that levies a tax on all ammunition and firearms and I believe all the fishing gear too. And that goes into the federal coffers to, be used for habitat restoration and, helping to maintain these things. There's an organization out there called Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. And those guys are really at the forefront of a lot of the access issues that we end up having here in the West when it comes to getting out to our public land, because there's a lot of these lands that are landlocked. There's these checkerboard patterns, particularly along through Wyoming and northern Nevada. So you've got federal and private land all interspersed. And so, that's caused a lot of issues. There's a pretty famous case that's been working its way through Wyoming there about the corner crossers.
Yep.
And, that might be hunters that are doing this, and these guys might want to go into these areas and hunt, but the legal precedent that's being set here is going to affect all of us. And, it doesn't matter if you're hiking or mountain biking or you like riding your ATV in certain areas. So, these things are pretty, it's an important issue that a lot of people need to pay attention to. And, to that end, as far as funding, because our public land management agencies are desperately underfunded. It's a real shame that, at the time where you have so many people going out and enjoying the outdoors, the budgets are just getting cut more and more for the land management agency. So, I'm kind of one of those that supports some sort of a tax similar to the Robertson-Pittman Act on outdoor gear. There really should be more, the outdoor industry should be more proactive on that. You hear us, guys? Be more proactive on it. Especially the big companies.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the whole tax thing has been kind of controversial, but like I said, as a person who does benefit from the sale of those things, I absolutely think that should be included. A big brunt of the burden right now for conservation is being frankly held up by anglers and hunters, and I think it's more than reasonable to think that all of us, because all of us, like you said, have a hand in this fight. I think it's up to all of us to be doing our part to kind of help it. So yeah, I've definitely have advocated for that as well. Again, I know it's a little bit controversial because nobody wants to spend more money, but it's just a way for us to be able to get back to the places that frankly we have to have in order to do our hobbies.
Yeah. It costs a lot. Land management isn't necessarily cheap.
Yeah. No, I can contest to that for sure. So yeah, and along those lines, my next question, I was saying, I did love that you do include those historical, detailed voiceovers that you do of the places. It's just fascinating to me that like I've learned so much just from watching your videos about places that I'd heard of before, but never really did any kind of deep dive into that. And I think you kind of already touched on it, but what made you want to include that in your videos? Because I'm sure that's a lot of work.
Well, it is. And, originally, this started out kind of just as a hiking vlog. Most of my earlier videos are, just be going through the woods with the, GoPro and just, talking about what I'm seeing and what I'm doing. But this particular genre of YouTube videos that we're in has grown quite a bit. There's a lot of new players that have come in. You have a lot of guys doing vlogs, and me, I like that stuff. I can sit there and watch Jerry with Tangent Trails or Eric with Seeking Lost. I can watch those guys wander through the wilds and talk about what they're doing and filming it. I mean, I just appreciated so much that these guys go out on these things and they film it, and you get to see it all, and it's so those. Where was I going with that? So as I was going through a lot of these things, we all want our channels to grow. We want to try and expand our audience, and so I started adding music to it. I'm a musician, and I have a recording studio, or the remainders of it. When I lived in Alaska, I had a recording studio and ran a record label for a bunch of years up there. Ate my shorts, didn't make any money at it. It was in the mid aughts, right as people decided they didn't want to pay for music anymore. So, I was had all this outlay of expenditures for gear and recording and getting CDs made up, and then of course we're all the way up there in Alaska, and to get these bands down to the lower 48 and actually touring and selling merchandise. The whole model changed. And so, but I still kept the studio. I'm a musician myself. And so I was trying to record, I was trying to write all my own music. And so I just started kind of adding stuff just to try and make things a little bit more interesting. But last year I had this, I've been out in a place called Basin and Range National Monument. And I'd gone out there. I spent a week out there, and the weather was just terrible. Like the first 3 days, this was in May, but the first 3 days, it was just, the days would start out nice, but then the clouds would billow up. And then by the end of the day, it was windy and rainy and just, and I think I spent 3 days in the back of the truck with the dogs. I watched the whole trilogy of The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit.
Wow. That's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, it was kind of fun to sit out there in the middle of nowhere and, watch that. But I mean, the weather was pretty iffy. But I finally got out around the National Monument is huge. And so I went around to a bunch of the different areas, just kind of talked about some of the, geology. And I had been through it once before, so I was kind of had an idea of where I wanted to go. But when it came down to editing that video, I had no idea what direction to go, because I hadn't really put together much of a good narrative in there. It was just a bunch of, this and that thrown together. Oh yeah, this is pretty. Oh, here's this, here's that. And so I decided to try something new. And so that was the first one that I really did the hard lean in to much more production and having a much more produced end product. And so I started putting music in. I started using YouTube's music library, and that video, for whatever reason, that's been my most viewed one at almost 150,000 views. It brought me in, I think I was like 500 subscribers, brought me 1,600 within a couple of weeks. And, it was kind of weird. I was just like, I couldn't believe that all these people were all of a sudden paying attention to the video. But the other thing I leaned into with this stuff too, and personally, I'm not a big fan. It's kind of a little bit of a turnoff, but the fact of the matter is, having things slightly clickbaity works. It gets people's attention, and you're competing in a pretty competitive market. So I started using the, like that video I'm talking about was called, The National Monument You've Never Heard Of. And I made sure that, never heard of was in all capital. And, and I put a picture up there, You know, I think it says empty and forgotten. And there's a picture of me and the dog standing way out in this big scene. Well, it turns out most people hadn't heard of Basin Range National Monument. And so I think that combined with the kind of clickbaity title and thumbnail, it worked. And so now I haven't seen that success in any of my videos since then, which is fine though, because overall my viewership, content viewer retention, and all those have been up much more than they ever were before. So that's kind of, you know, that I just kind of stumbled on that, and people seem to like it. But you're right, it is a lot more work. You know, it's I've been sitting here all day working on a video that's going to be coming out this weekend. I'm going to be exploring an old castle in southern France. Yeah, this will be cool. So it's
that'll be awesome.
Yeah, it should be pretty fun. So I've kind of branched out on a few kind of different things. You know, you probably saw the video of where we flew on a powered paraglider this summer. I have another one. I was down in the Tool Valley Hardpan, which is this dry lake bed down in central West Utah. And I met with another guy I've become friends with through YouTube. He has his name is Rick Hypes, and he has a channel called Wind is Fun, and they land sail. And they travel out, and he and his friends come out from Colorado every year to the dry lake beds here in Nevada and Utah, and they have these really cool rigs that they get on, and you know, when the wind's blowing, it's sailing. And so I've kind of tried to branch into, I'm still sticking with the core things of hiking and camping and all that, but I've tried to branch into a few more activities that people do on public lands. Although I don't know if the castle's public land. It's open for the public to go into, but you have to pay to get in there. But you know, that's, you know, so I figure a little bit of diversity, just kind of showing people, you know, how much cool stuff there is out there in the world that you can go and do. You know, I'm just trying to lean into that stuff a little bit more, you know, and it's fun.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. Yeah. I think that's a great thing, you know, branching out into new areas and kind of introducing things that people probably didn't even know existed. And, you know, like your channel name says, it's about the journey, and that's part of the journey.
It is
experiencing those new things. I think we all in the YouTube community have a ongoing love-hate relationship with all things algorithm and analytics. You know, we love to see them, but at the same time, it's just feel like you're kind of in this, you know, almost like a meat grinder kind of thing where, you know, for me, like I got really burned out on doing talking head videos, which my biggest video is a review of the Durston X-Mid. I did it right here in my living room.
Oh yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
So, but you know, they play a part, and you know, they are important. And you know, being in the industry, obviously, I have a vested interest in sharing gear. But yeah, I mean, you know, it's really about, I think, finding that medium of what you enjoy versus what people want to see. And so, you know, it seems like you are doing a really good job of kind of surfing that wave. So kudos to you for that one.
Thanks.
Yeah. So the last question I have, and if this is proprietary information, I understand, you can say that for sure. But you know, as a person who does more of the overlanding thing and the more dispersed camping, because I think a lot of your places you go to aren't necessarily like established campgrounds and stuff.
Right.
What's a little bit about? Could you share a little bit about your process of how you choose your camping sites that you go to?
Well, a lot of it is wandering around down little tiny tracks or old dirt roads just to see what's out there. You know, there's so many campsites that I found that, you know, because I like to try and find the most scenic spot I can. So if I can park up someplace high that's got a nice big open, you know, vista, those are kind of the campsites I like. So I usually try to find something like that. Preferably something that's close to, you know, some good hiking. I kind of like a lot of the choose your own adventure. I like a good trail. Don't get me wrong. I really appreciate good trail building and engineering and stuff. But I also like just wandering out there in the wilds, because you got to make sure you remember where you've been and where you're going so you don't get lost. But yeah, there's just a lot of just wandering around on back roads. Whenever I was driving down, I would usually come down to the lower 48. I've got family here in Salt Lake, so I'd come down most fall or winter. And usually on my way down, I'd always make sure I take my time coming through, Yukon, British Columbia, Eastern Washington, Eastern Oregon. A lot of times I come through Idaho and then drop down into Nevada. And, so I've got this whole list of all these little backcountry campsites that I found. So yeah, I just pretty much try to find places that aren't too close to where you got a lot of other people camping. Sometimes those areas aren't, like I'm real big on picking up trash when I'm out there. There've been lots of campsites that, I'll get there. Wow, this is great. Well, I got to pick up the garbage first, and because unfortunately some people are not conscientious or don't care about that. Can't, no matter how many times you tell them, aluminum cans and glass bottles do not burn.
No, they do not.
Out. Those are both very recyclable materials too. So, but that's just kind of the nature of it. You come across a lot of that kind of stuff, and you got to clean it up. But yeah, a lot of it is just wandering around and just kind of sticking my nose in all these little corners and crevices out there on the public lands. I mean, there are so many little dirt roads and old mining tracks and cattle tracks that just wander all over the place, especially like Nevada's my favorite state. I mean, that place is just, it's just so huge and so full of all sorts of hidden little secrets that you just can't believe. It's like, wow, this is Nevada, and so, yeah. So, like for anybody listening that, wonders about these places, just take the time to go down some of these dirt roads. Be careful so you don't get your car stuck, but, just, kind of wander around and find what you can find. So
it's amazing the places that you would never know existed unless you took the time to try and scout them out. One of my favorite statistics when I was in school was that the National Park Service did a study, and they found that 90 to 95% of park guests never go farther than like 150 to 200 feet away from their car.
Yep.
So
exactly.
you might find yourself in Yellowstone, which is the most visited national park in the world. But if you just go a half mile down a trail, it's like you're in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
So just a little bit of work, but you can usually find something amazing.
Yeah. That's what's so great about having so much public land out here like that, whether it's a park, wildlife refuge, BLM, Forest Service, you go wandering out there and, I hear people complain a lot on the internet about, oh, there's too many people, you're showing off. I've actually been lectured before when I've been out filming by people that, oh, you're not going to put this on YouTube, are you? And, it's just like, well, would you like to be on camera? But
that's a thing.
Yeah. I'm usually nice to people though. I'm a real sociable guy. When I'm out on the trail, I say hi to everybody. I like talking about people's experiences out there. I'm pretty friendly with a lot of that. But yeah, occasionally you run into some people, they see you're carrying a GoPro and I usually have a microphone on the top with one of those little dead cat, wind things. And yeah, so, you run into people that are like, but
it's a big thing here in Montana. You'll see a lot of stickers out there that say no vacancy and go back to where you came from. And I get a lot of people, but I think generally speaking, most people in Montana do understand that the best way to protect something is to have awareness of it. So, there's a lot of, just like any other thing, you always run into some interesting variety of personalities out there.
Well, absolutely.
Mike, thank you so much for joining. This is awesome. I really appreciate your passion for public lands, and I definitely share that. And I love the way that you are proactively, supporting that through your, education and involvement in your channel. So I will definitely put a link for your channel below for those of you that want to check Mike out, and I highly recommend it because he has some of the best videos out there. So yeah, anything else you wanted to add before we sign off?
We need to get together and go hiking.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%.
Whether it's in Montana or if you get the winter blues and you want some desert action, come down here and we'll hit the desert Southwest in the wintertime. So
I definitely would do that. I love the desert Southwest, and I do not get to spend enough time in it. So I would be 100% up for that for sure.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. It's the first time anyone's interviewed me.
Oh, well, awesome. You did great. You would have never known. So thank you again for taking the time to meet with me, and to everybody else out there, as always, keep hiking on.
Absolutely. Thanks. See everybody later.